Let's talk brothels on the front lines of World War II. Today, military brothels aren't really a thing, but they used to be really common. In World War II, Germany, Japan, and France all had brothels on the front lines. Germany was by far the worst. They had 500 brothels across Europe and 34,000 women who had been kidnapped or otherwise forced to serve as sex slaves in these brothels. Oftentimes, each one of them servicing more than 30 men a day. In Japan, they had a similar habit of kidnapping women, often Korean girls who were around 15 years old, 85% of them virgins, and forcing them to serve as sex workers for their frontline soldiers. A lot of these women killed themselves. France took a gentler approach. They had volunteer prostitutes who served in these mobile units that basically went around the front lines as little mobile brothels. And the UK had a few brothels in the beginning of the war until they found out about it back home, and then that stopped. And the US did not have any brothels in Europe during World War II. Why were these brothels so common? Essentially, it was the thing about control. They didn't want soldiers forming intimate relationships with locals and spilling military secrets. They also didn't want their soldiers getting syphilis, which at the time was incurable and potentially fatal. There was also a belief that brothels on the front lines would keep the soldiers from raping and pillaging and committing sexual violence, which really didn't work out well at all for Germany or Japan, who certainly did a lot of that kind of stuff. But what about the Soviet Union? The Soviet Union did not have brothels on the front lines, and they are notorious for raping their way into Germany. The German Frau at that time had a saying, "Better a Russian on top of you than 6 feet of dirt." And Stalin, when he heard about this behavior, he said, "Let them have their fun." In my book, Rosa's War, Rosa and her fellow snipers are constantly fighting off soldiers, usually Red Army officers, but sometimes just regular soldiers. Their behavior became increasingly violent and chaotic as it got closer to Germany. Rosa called these front lines a dark and ugly place. Some people say that the Soviets would not have raped their way into Germany if they'd had brothels on the front lines. Who's to say if that's true? Hard to know. The brothels certainly weren't a good solution, did not prevent violence with the Germans or the Japanese, but maybe it has more to do with the message that comes down from the top. Hitler, Hirohito, and Stalin all encouraged sexual violence against women. Stay tuned for more conversations about Soviet-era issues.